Hi, I'm Armen CEO of the World Affairs Council of San Antonio, and I'm here with the CEO of Port San Antonio, Jim Perschbach. It's very nice to visit with you today.
Thanks so much, Armen. It's great to be here.
And we are going to talk a little bit about you, a little bit about Port San Antonio, and also you are the honoree for the International Citizen of the Year, which we're putting on. So we're going to bundle all that together and talk about it. But before we dive into all of that, tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, how you ended up in San Antonio, how you ended up in at the port.
I was born in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. My dad was in and out of Vietnam at the time, and that was just a good place to be born outside of Fort Bragg. And then kind of moved around the country, moved around the world. Lived everywhere from California, Utah, Israel, London, Pennsylvania. Went to school, became a lawyer. As part of that, wound up in Corpus Christi for various reasons. And then Tullis Wells brought me up to San Antonio back in 2005 and haven't left.
And do you think living in all those countries, do you think that shaped you to where you are today, both personally and professionally?
I think it was very interesting. You know, you go around and when you get to know somebody, the first thing you see are differences, but then you start to realize that there are patterns of more similarities between people than there are differences. And that's something that I think we can find internationally. And it's one of the things I admire about your organization and the people in your organization is really looking for the ties that bind, as Bruce Springsteen used to say, more so than what the differences are.
A lot of music analogy. Music plays a big part in your life.
It does. I'm a weird human being. I can talk to you about a lot of things. I can talk to you about music, particularly heavy metal. I can talk to you about crocodilians and airplanes and theme parks. And after that, I'm kind of boring.
And you were also in a band, you were saying.
I've been in a couple of bands in my lifetime, none of them very good.
And what was your role? And
So for a little while, I played drums because in junior high, I played drums in the band, and I was horrible at that. And then by the time I got to college, I started playing rhythm guitar. And I was very loud. I could do a lot of power chords. I could sort of keep a rhythm. But there is nothing with rhythm guitar that you can't disguise with some distortion and some volume.
nice.
And that was the whole point of our band, was to be loud.
Can you share with us a little bit of, the port is always in the news. There's a lot of great initiatives happening. What is the port? A little, 30-second version of the history and how the port contributes to the community.
Yeah, 30 seconds, I don't know if I can do, but here's the long story very short. The port right now is a research campus. And what we are trying to do is find ways to accelerate the integration of talent and technology into our defense industrial and critical infrastructure base. And what that really means is finding ways to attract people and the ideas that people bring to solve some of the pressing problems that are facing us. What it grows out of is an old Air Force base, Kelly Air Force Base. And people think of Kelly very differently depending on where they are from in San Antonio. I can tell you that I first heard about Kelly when I was a tiny, tiny little kid. 5 or 6 years old, I knew that big airplanes were being worked on in San Antonio.
Because of your dad, yes?
Because of my dad, because of my grandfather, just because of a real passion for airplanes at the time. But I couldn't tell you where San Antonio was on a map until I was in college. In the early 90s, I remember up in DC being kind of tangentially involved in discussions about Kelly because of the work it was doing as an air logistics center, just maintaining aircraft for the military. When Kelly closed, there was a lot of debate about what the future of it should be. And a lot of very brilliant people, Tullis Wells, a host of others, got involved in trying to figure out what that future would be. And it kind of morphed on a lot of things for a lot of years. What we coalesced around a couple of years ago, I guess 7, 8 years ago, was using it as this talent and technology accelerator. So one of the challenges that we face in not just our defense industrial base, but our corporate base right now is as you mature in technology, you start to create a lot of process, a lot of procedures, a lot of orthodoxy that grows on lessons that you learned. But eventually that becomes stagnating as you reach the next evolution of whatever the talent and technology is. So as we are moving into this digital age, as we're moving into an age where everything is becoming integrated into a system, that becomes binding and it becomes limiting. And the bet that I made with some friends of mine who were in the defense industrial world back in, I think it was 2015, 2016, was that we could use the port to attract a whole bunch of people who normally would never go to a defense industrial complex. And out of that group, we would find a few that would be interested enough or intrigued enough that we could get them where they could become recruitable, employable, they could become part of this ecosystem. We could also, during that process, identify a couple of concepts that in retrospect seem shockingly simple, that have application to either aerospace and defense or critical infrastructure, but nobody in our world would have thought of that because it required a different perspective, a different point of view. And the salutary benefit of all of that was something that I always was really attracted to about the port. When I first came down here, it was as a lawyer for the defense industrial base. And I remember seeing, we had some of the most important work going on the planet right here on these 1,900 acres. And we are surrounded by tens of thousands of people in communities that are some of the most underserved and forgotten about communities in the country. And there was absolutely no integration. So you say, Jim, what does that mean? Well, part of what it means is this building that we're sitting in here, which is the Boeing Center. Out of this building, we have attracted several 100,000 kids. Not just kids, but kids are the ones that are easiest to track. None of whom would ever have walked onto an industrial campus or a defense campus. But we bring them down here, we show them things like what David Monroe has done with the San Antonio Museum of Science and Technology, and a certain percentage of those kids become interested in wanting to pursue something more. Through this kind of silly arena we built back here, which partially I did because I wanted Parkway Drive to play San Antonio, but this is what pays for the building. And it throws off additional cash. You see all the sponsors around here, Boeing and Frost Bank. That has allowed us to put just about $1 million in the past year and a half, give or take, into our educational programs. So those same kids who decide they want to do something more, we've matched up on programs where they've built their own gaming computer and learned how to use a computer. They've matched up with people that can help them, and they take that machine home. Had a couple hundred kids come in and build their own drone, take their drone home, get their drone operator's license, and understand that integration between signals technology and aviation, which is the heart of advanced air mobility. And we've had kids come in and work on space research projects, most of whom, and it doesn't matter whether they come from a neighborhood where they don't have a lot of economic prosperity, or they come from a neighborhood where they have a lot of economic prosperity but don't have anybody telling them they can achieve, are now finding out that even rocket science isn't rocket science and they can do something. So I think last time we checked, it was 200 some odd thousand kids that have come through the building. And we're right around 1,000 some odd kids that have gone through the different programs, just that we fund. David's run 42 summer programs this past summer. Wow. To get those kids there. So bet one, won. Bet two, we met some people in doing that who we as a campus never would have met. One of them I like to talk about is the Plus One robotics folks. And we got to talking to them. What they were looking at doing was taking a whole suite of sensors technology, computer vision, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and building that on the back of industrial robots. Their application was for e-commerce. But if you can take a robot out of a controlled environment and put it into an uncontrolled environment, You open up a host of things: orbital manufacturing, space manufacturing, lunar manufacturing, Arctic and Antarctic exploration environments, and desert environments. So we leased to them. Nobody in their right mind would have leased to these guys. They had no credit, no money, no background. Truly put them in a garage and a classroom on the campus. And today, they're one of the biggest success stories out of San Antonio. I take no credit for their genius work. I take credit for being able to kind of pan for gold and find them, find the Xyrec people, find Bianca Rhodes, these people who are putting those talents together. And it's by that bringing different populations together.
I want to, there's so much to unravel there. I want to go back to the first thing you talked about, talent. I know when I was on the Education Workforce Committee with the Chamber, we talked about local talent and how sometimes it's hard to, looking at post-secondary education.
You look at a company that we have on the campus here called Standard Arrow. They've got a program that they put together where if you have a level of technical aptitude, which means you can assemble an IKEA furniture or you can put a Lego set together, in 12 to 14 weeks, while they pay you, they can get you to the point where you can sit on their factory floor working on jet engines. You're not doing the actual jet engine work. Don't worry, you're not getting on an airplane with somebody with 14 weeks of experience has been on it. But then that allows the person to learn on the job, to learn in the classroom, what it takes to actually become an engine technician and go on to what is a very high paid, very high skilled career. What has been beautiful about that is of the couple hundred people they've run through that program in the past year and a half, a good number are people who've been dropping their kids off for educational programs here or over at the David Monroe Center across the street, see the ad, and they go from being in hospitality or something else, which are fine careers, into something that is a truly high-end type of career. I'm pleased to see that's kind of where I see Ready to Work and these other efforts kind of morphing into.
What are some of the things on the horizon that are coming? I know there's some growth structurally. What does that entail, and where do you see the port in the years to come?
Well, the one I'm most excited about is what we call advanced air mobility. And full disclosure, I don't know if the lawyers still make me say this. I sat on the state's commission or board or whatever for advanced air mobility. This is what people call air taxis. They're flying cars is another thing people call them. They are an evolution of airplanes, an evolution of helicopters. You can think of them as kind of giant hobbyist drones that you can put people or cargo into.
Kind of like the Jetsons, but
Kind of like the Jetsons. And the advantages is that the maneuverability of these aircraft, the sound profile of these aircraft allows them, I'm going to say in theory, but let me explain that in a second, to operate much more efficiently and much more effectively than traditional aircraft. And here's why I say in theory. If you look at a fixed wing airplane that's coming in, it's like at San Antonio International, the primary approach path into San Antonio International takes you over the north side, over the Stone Oak area, and then you hit the localizer somewhere outside of Camp Bullis, and you come in. It's about a 9 or 10 mile final where you come in. And you're slowing down from maybe 180 to about 140 when you come over. You're not going to hit anything. Your reaction time can be human speed reaction time because there's nothing else around you. You control that airspace. The promise of advanced air mobility is that we can use these airplanes in close proximity to other aircraft and to buildings. And what that means practically, if anybody out there is a pilot or in aviation, they're going to just kill me for what I'm saying because I'm oversimplifying this. But if you're moving at, say, 30 miles per hour, but 30 miles per hour next to another aircraft, next to a building, your reaction time needs to be very different. The control profile of how you interface with that machine is very, very different. So it's going to require as much a reimagining of the airspace and a reimagining of the technology that we use. That's where the port comes in. This is going to be the future of our mobility. There are really easy use cases. I say easy, nothing's easy, but United Airlines and Archer are looking at flying these airplanes from downtown Chicago to O'Hare. And you check in to your United flight in downtown Chicago. You go that, 19, 20 miles to O'Hare, but it can take you an hour, hour and 15 minutes to do it in traffic. If you're flying Polaris class out of O'Hare, it's fine. You'll pay the premium for it. It's comfortable. By the time you get to O'Hare, you're through security. It's cool. Pan Am was doing that in the 60s from the Pan Am building to JFK. There are people who are looking at doing this for relatively inexpensive, but not cheap. So there's companies that want to get to Uber Black pricing that goes from a suburban environment to a downtown or medical center environment. Whisk is looking at doing this in Houston. And their target, I think, is Uber Black pricing from Sugar Land to Houston. So what's that going to be? $200, give or take, a person? Jim, and I emphasize Jim because I'm not speaking for the state's AAM committee and I'm not speaking for the port here. I think the future also entails these aircraft being used for public transportation. So think of VIA.
Wow.
And instead of having to build all the fixed infrastructure that is required for buses or for rail, which becomes relatively immobile, you get these aircraft moving from something resembling a park and ride to whether it's a downtown basketball arena, whether it's a port, whether it's a university, whether it's a hospital district. And you get some density of these aircraft, maybe 30 or 40 of them operating in a generalized area. You can move a lot of people. You can move people on demand with what effectively is a transportation web. The price point there is inherently subsidized. So you get somebody like a VIA. I'm certainly not saying VIA is doing this. I don't want John Gary coming after me. But in the future state, and future state I think is relatively close to us, they buy a lot of these airplanes. They operate these airplanes the same way public transportation is operated. And it provides a societal good. It provides a taxpayer good. It doesn't replace every other area of transportation, but it fills in that need. Selfishly, for us here at the port, we've added about 9,000 jobs in the past 6 or 7 years to this campus. We expect we're going to add 12 to 18,000 more in the next 7 to 10 years.
Wow.
A parking garage costs you about $40 million, and nobody wants 20 to 40 million. Nobody wants to pay for parking. And then we have to build more roads and move people out. If we can move 1,000 people a day on and off our campus by using these aircraft, we don't have to build that parking garage for 20 to 40 million dollars.
Pardon the strange question, but are these concepts of these transporting devices, are they smaller than, or what do they look like?
So right
And
now,
are they piloted by a person?
that's a really good question. So there's a whole different group of these that are being developed. Archer, and I think the Archer one is one of the coolest looking ones on Earth, especially when it's in black or the United colors. Has a lot of rotors on it. It is just kind of space agey. Whisk, which is a Boeing company, we've got some displays of that here at the Boeing Center,
Okay.
is a little yellow and black, looks kind of like a Bumblebee vehicle with 4 seats in it. And everybody's kind of in between. Those, I think, make a lot of sense for higher end private transportation. But what I'm imagining really is something between a van and a bus.
Mm.
It's not very pretty. It's relatively utilitarian. And you get into it, and it moves you not huge distances, 20, 30 mile distances at most, maybe 5, 6 mile distances. One of the routes we want to do is about 1.5 miles from our vertiport to the park and ride. What that does for you, your question is, what do they look like? I don't know exactly how they're going to look. You got to have enough where you can move the payload and you can move the payload efficiently. Your question about piloted is really interesting. Right now, to operate an aircraft in airspace, you've got to have a conventionally licensed and trained pilot operating under conventional air traffic control systems. WISC is looking at a fully autonomous future. So you get in that airplane, there's no pilot, there's no ground station control. The airplane is flying itself, conceptually similar to one of those Waze or Waymo type vehicles. That is inherently a much trickier process to get to, because not only do you have to develop the technology to get you there, you've got to develop the regulatory approvals, you've got to develop the consumer acceptance of it, which is the other way the port comes into play. So I'm not old enough to remember this, but in the 1930s, all the airlines paid all kinds of Hollywood stars and other celebrities to get their pictures taken, getting on and off old Ford Trimotors and DC-2s and Boeing 247s, just to get people comfortable that you could get in those airplanes. One of the things we want to do at the port is very similar. With some of these kind of prove up short routes, with some of these routes that are being flown by people who are more willing to accept the risk, and frankly, just kind of using it like a theme park where people hop in an airplane and do a quick ride around our campus, that shows that this stuff is perfectly safe, is perfectly efficient, is perfectly reasonable, and it becomes that use case and consumer acceptance.
What projecting, and I know you like predictions. What year do you think we would have a prototype that actually?
So the airplanes can fly today. When I say they can fly, they can physically fly. There's talk that one or two of them will get their certificates this year. But in terms of actually being, it's a huge step between I've got a license to fly and there's actually a case for me in which to fly. So we're hoping that our campus and what we're doing here helps accelerate the business case development, the use case development, and the regulatory development.
Yeah.
And again, everything I just said, somebody who's deep in the industry is going to come in and say, Jim, you've dramatically oversimplified that. There are a lot of nuances, and I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that I'm saying the FAA or anybody else is dragging their feet on this. The state, the FAA, TxDOT have been working tremendously hard. But I can also tell you, as somebody who flies and somebody who is underneath airplanes flying, I want them to be tremendously cautious on that.
It's very exciting. What an exciting thing. Switching gears back to the museum and SAMSAT, was that part of the vision when you arrived here? And I know my wife took her little sister from the Big Brother Big Sister program, and they walked around and had a ball. And that the exhibits are growing. What a fascinating place for people to go to. How is that in relation to the port? And a little bit more about the educational initiatives in relation to the museum and David.
Yeah, so when we started on our journey of trying to get people to the port, we knew we needed an attractor. I didn't know that was going to be a museum. So I met David through a mutual friend. David has not just acquired a slew of technologies, he's built and created a slew of technologies. And what he really wanted to do was show people that they can do it too. That really is his driving passion. So managed to talk David into moving that outfit down here. And it has grown like a weed. And when you look at what's being done over there, it's David and it's people like David who are doing this in a very punk rock style manner. We're not doing this with big institutional money or people who really know how to operate museums. It's being built around trying to give people direct access to that technology. And it's something that is slowly in fits and starts growing into something really special. I've been really, really impressed with what David has been able to do. and the people that David can attract into his orbit. People like Sam Jimenez from the WEX Foundation and Astroport, Kieran, who's a really tremendous professor of space sciences up at UTSA with her Space Exploration Academy, the folks at the D. Howard Foundation. We have all of these programs where whatever you want to do as a young person, there's somebody here who can help you do it.
It's fascinating to watch David speak about the exhibit. You could tell he's passionate, he's genuine about it, and it just comes off kind of like when you talk about Techport and what's happening here. Elaborate on this concept here. It is a fascinating arena. It's very intimate. It's also very big. Where did this idea come about, and where do you see it going down the line?
So a lot of this I ripped off from theme parks. And the first thing is, did you ever go to Epcot in the 80s?
No. Mm-mm.
Epcot in the 80s was something special. Epcot today is good, but Epcot in the 80s was something special. And you came in and every exhibit was this kind of magical combination of some corporate story and something that was a level of inspiring, and they all ended with a bad 1979, 1981 disco pop song. But it got people actually paying attention to whatever that topic was. So with this, there were a couple problems that we knew we needed to solve. The first one, we got a lot of people working down here, and there was no place to eat, there was no place to drink, there were no amenities. And it kind of boggles my mind. To this day, people say, Jim, why are you investing in trying to build amenities down there? But nobody asked Graham Weston why he's trying to build amenities in downtown San Antonio. You can't have a working environment without something where people can go eat and socialize. The second part was to create something that brought the disparate populations together, both the disparate populations on this campus and the disparate populations from around our community. And that's where this came in. So in here in this room, we have different concerts and different sporting events. They are shockingly different. So we're going to have in the next couple of months, we're going to have Spirit Box and Trivium. We're having Los Tigres del Norte come in. We're having boxing. Every one of those audiences, every one of the people who are going to come, shockingly different. This is a major reason that we've got close to 100% occupancy of our office buildings on this campus and 96, 97% occupancy of our buildings on this campus. The second thing that it does is it creates that ability for us when we're not using it for a actual paying show. This is where we bring those kids in, we do events. Sometimes it's gaming competitions. Sometimes it's robotics competitions. Sometimes it's just community events. But it's a giant space that otherwise didn't exist to bring people in and allow them to integrate. The gaming center on the other side of this building, with that gaming center, the way I sold it to people was that there is a gamification going on in our core industries, which is absolutely true. Human-machine interfaces are getting a lot of gamification. Critical infrastructure is getting a lot of gamification. So we want people to come in and understand gaming. But that's not the real reason for that room. The real reason is this. If people have something in common, they forget they're not supposed to like each other. And if you walk into that gaming center any given evening, any given weekend, you're going to see kids from shockingly different backgrounds, shockingly different ethnicities and racial backgrounds, different points of view, but they bond over whatever game they happen to be playing. And in doing so, there are relationships that are built. We've seen that in the military as well. We worked with Air Force Gaming to put together this event called ForceCon, which is every branch of the armed services has an e-gaming or esports team. They come in here, they play against each other for a week, and then the winner goes on, sometimes plays a minor league professional team or plays for the championship. But what they're really doing it becomes a team building exercise, it becomes a retention exercise, it becomes a talent identification exercise. That is a societal good. I truly believe, because there's a soft heart to me, there is a societal good from that. But it also becomes a shockingly important, critical next step good. I mentioned about plus one robotics and Knight Aerospace. Those Tesla coils over there that shoot sparks out are a way to demonstrate that you can do wireless power transmission. We have known for decades, century now, that you can generate power from space and wirelessly beam it back down to a planet. One of the reasons that we have said we're not going to pursue space-based power generation has been the cost of assembling those satellites up in orbit. You take something like Plus One Robotics is doing. They weren't doing it because of space-based power generation. But if you can allow a robot to operate in a truly uncontrolled environment, your cost of assembling a multi-mile wide satellite as part of a multi-thousand mile wide constellation is dramatically lower. If you can assemble on the moon and launch from the moon, whether it's for space-based power generation or as the pit stop to Mars, doing that with an astronaut, astronomically expensive and probably not feasible. Doing it with a host of 40-pound robots becomes a whole lot more feasible. So we're about to launch a childcare initiative here on the campus. You know, people know how to do childcare. What we want to do is figure out how we can prototype a childcare solution that offers kind of crazy hours. Most childcares operate on hours that are not convenient for a lot of different employers, in a location that is convenient to where the work is, and then also solves that challenge. In San Antonio, you can probably find a childcare educator because we're a big city. If you're the Air Force and you're operating an installation up in North Dakota or Montana, it's more difficult to find somebody who wants to go there. So through some of the work we're working on with entities like Pre-K for SA, and I'll tell you right now, Texas A&M San Antonio, which I think is a fantastic institution, bringing a model together where it's a laboratory teaching school for the students. We want to build to a level, nobody's there yet, where the students can get a stipend and scholarships, but it's kind of like Teach for America, or the way the Royal Canadian Forces send people. Your first job out of school for a couple years may be in Montana or North Dakota, but it allows you to scale those problems. And there are a lot of brilliant people in the DoD. A lot of people I have tremendous respect for. The DoD's challenge and big private equity's challenge and big businesses' challenge is identical. They really can only operate at scale. They can only do things at scale because that's where they're ready to operate. But you can't scale something, you can't move to production until you've prototyped and figured out what you want to do. Most of the prototype efforts around childcare, around installation, just how you build it and how you efficiently manage it, have traditionally failed because the experiments are so small that they don't give you a lot of data that is then scalable. The port becomes kind of an interesting test case. With this campus of the future that we're looking to launch, we've got the ability on our 1,900 acres to do something that is at a great enough scale that you can take lessons learned in terms of how you're going to scale this across other installations, but is not so big that you're risking the enterprise or you're going to just completely strangle the enterprise because you're trying to do it across the board. That's, I think that's really an intriguing thing that, again, San Antonio and Port San Antonio brings to the table.
It seems like you know, they're always talking about youth and forming that spark with the student. It seems like there are a lot of different opportunities to create that spark
Yeah.
for them to come back and do internships here and eventually work here and be the future leaders. Um, Speaking of leadership, are there people who are some people that you look up to now or in the past, and then running a huge business like the port. What sort of leadership qualities, techniques do you advise for people who are the young Jims of now?
Well, nobody wants to be a young Jim because you don't want this life. One person I can't say enough about is Tullis Wells. You look at Tullis, and Tullis is an amazing force of nature in many fronts. And you look at the projects that he's been associated with, they have been community changing, they've been state changing, they've really lifted up whole layers of effort. And a lot of that is what we're trying to do. The biggest challenge that Jim thinks in the world is people are told all the reasons they can't do something. They're told all the reasons something won't work. And that's easy to do. I can tell you all the reasons something is stupid, right?
Yeah.
And somehow we've made that a virtue where people want to say, that's dumb, and here's 20 reasons why. And what that does is that allows you to never have to challenge yourself. What we're trying to do is to bring people in and show them it doesn't really matter where you start. It doesn't matter what support base you have. You can do this stuff. It just requires somebody to help open that door for you and somebody to help you through the way. Sometimes people question, probably justifiably, with this organization in the past 6 or 7 years, we've raised our top line revenue 116% and our net operating revenue 114%. We have also started to put a shocking amount of money into educational and community activities and stuff that I got a lot of people saying, why on earth are you doing that? And there's two answers. The answer that I'll give to somebody on the board or in our finance world is the reason we can drive up the rents and drive up the demand is because we're bringing those people here. Nobody in their right mind says, I'm going to go pay 50, 60, 70 bucks a square foot for a broken down 1950s airbase. But the societal reason, and what I think is really, really important for us to do globally, is you cannot create a functional society and a functional economy by telling people that they're destined to fail. When you do that, people aren't going to do a thing, and they're going to sit back and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when we bring 100 kids in here, and I need to, as I'm talking, I realize I need to get on this again. We paid, I think it was $200 some odd thousand in hard costs, plus whatever it took us to bring all the people in and get them to spend their time. But we had 100 kids down there building a gaming machine. Before they built that gaming machine, they spent a couple weeks learning how to turn on computers, learning what computers are, learning how they could do it, just getting a level of familiarity. And they took that machine home. Some of them took home data cards because they didn't have access to broadband. But sitting down there with them, you had people from AMD, you had people from the Air Force, you had people from other employers on this campus, you had people from Texas A&M Esports and a host of other entities, sitting down with those young people and showing them they could do it and starting to build that network. The Space Exploration Academy and the WEX Foundation, those kids are coming in and they're learning about robotics and space and all kinds of nonsense. But they're also learning that they can meet up with people who are otherwise untouchable to them. Sam Jimenez is one of the few actual space architects on this planet. And he spends a good chunk of his time hands-on with young people. Some of them come from really, really challenged circumstances. Some of them come from really privileged circumstances, but none of them would have had the chance to be with somebody like Sam or somebody like Kieran without being in those programs. And the hope is that that then allows them to realize I can go off and I can achieve something, and I don't need to be scared of not achieving. So that's silly building, right? I've been told by a lot of people that I have a lot of respect for that that building is done. And they have a point. that building is going to cost us about $300 million. And we could fill that building up if we built it where it wasn't very pretty. But I don't want to do that. And it is something I can't tell you to my core, I won't do it. A couple of years ago, I was invited to speak in Bilbao. Are you familiar with Bilbao? Mm-hmm. I didn't know where Bilbao was. I knew nothing about it. Flew out there. It was shockingly gorgeous. And they put me up in this little hotel across the street from the Guggenheim. And I would have thought that was always the fanciest area of town. I know I've told you this story, so bear with me, I'll make it quick. And I gave my silly little speech. It was the tail end of the NATO conference, and got to have lunch with the president of the university and the mayor. And we were talking about what we're doing. And I think it was the president of the university says, "You stole our idea." And got to talking and found out that not only was Bilbao part of an area that had been economically and socially troubled, but that part of town was a broke down old seaport that had kind of gone away. And they did two things. They put in the Guggenheim and they built a tower that's now the Iberdrola Tower. And I think it was the president or the mayor, I can't remember which, said people rise to what you tell them they can be. And so with that tower, the reason I'm so adamant that we are going to build that tower, or I tell you, I will die on this hill, is for too long, not just the people in the neighborhood surrounding us, but San Antonio has been told, you guys don't matter. I hear it all the time. There's no tech in San Antonio. Well, there's more high-tech stuff being done in San Antonio than there is in Austin any day of the week. There's no opportunities in San Antonio. We've added 8,000, 9,000 jobs to this campus in 6 or 7 years with virtually no public sector incentives. But it's because we keep underplaying the stuff. And maybe there's a virtue in it. Maybe it's part of our society. But if we build a 5 or 6 story tilt wall building that looks like every other corporate office building in America, what we're saying is not only downplaying what we do here, but to a great extent, we're saying to the people around here that you don't matter. What I want to do is build something that is ostentatious and crazy, and that thing lights up at night and it does light shows and everything else. So it becomes an icon, not just of this campus, but it becomes something that the people who grow up around it can look at and say, that represents me. What you can't see from those renderings, you can sort of see from the model, is that it really does look like it's rising on the backs of not just the military history of San Antonio, but the agricultural history and the people that came before us. And in doing so, it's going to do what happened in Bilbao. It's going to do what happened with cathedrals and other landmarks in other cities. It becomes that common beacon, not the only beacon. I'm not telling you this is going to change San Antonio. I'll tell you the other thing, Armen. I remember when I was flying out to interview some of the architects on that building, ran into a developer friend, very successful developer friend, who's done amazing work in San Antonio elsewhere. And he said, yeah, Jim, that's a crazy idea that you're going to go build a building like that, because the RFP was on the street. And I remember flying into Chicago, changing flights up there because I always fly United. And suburban Chicago, suburban Houston, they are surrounded by office buildings that look just like that. And nobody bats an eye. In San Antonio, we think a $300 million office building with a $52, $53 a square foot price point is outrageous. And that's one of the things I want to fix, because we can do this stuff, Armen. We've done it. We're going to continue to do it. But we need to show that we believe in ourselves and we believe in the people here.
Well, the markups look remarkable. I mean, they just look fascinating. What's the time frame roughly?
So time frame, I want to, in the next month or so, get it to actual construction document stage of design, which means it's shovel ready, it's ready to go. The other couple of office buildings that we've built here, I was able to get them built totally spec. I didn't need anybody to pre-lease the building because we could afford the bet. We can't afford to do $300 million completely spec. The banks will laugh at us. But as soon as we get enough leasing, which I don't think we can get until we have an actual construction design and something resembling a schedule, we're not going to be able to start on the building. All goes according to plan. I'd like to be able to move shovels on making that building go up early part of next year, which allows us to complete that building around 28, 29, which is when we can bring the daycare online, we can bring some of the other amenities online, we can start bringing the Air Force projects online, and then you're going to see a whole new community being built down here. And ideally, and I want to make this emphasis, this is not in competition with any other part of San Antonio. If we are smart, what we are going, and by we, I mean everybody in San Antonio, we are going to be investing so that we are leveraging every part of the city. So it doesn't matter whether you're east, south, west, north, every part is relatively co-equal in terms of value and niceness and everything else. And every part is a participating part of the economy. And if you do that, we are going to exponentially grow from where we are today. So the projects that we've rolled out in total, probably $2 to $3 billion of investment that's going to come down here. I think it's absolutely feasible. I think the demand is there. I think the assets are there. Combined with what they're looking at doing downtown, combined with what they're looking at doing in some of the other parts of the community, combined with what we already have that we do well in San Antonio, you make that happen, and 10, 15 years from now, we're not having conversations about being the poorest or second poorest or third poorest big city in America. And that's the way we need to be moving forward.
And maybe bring an NFL team here.
There's only one NFL team that matters.
I have one more question, then I'm going to throw some quick answer questions. But the World Affairs Council is honoring you this year as our International Citizen of the Year. We normally pick someone who is doing a lot of great work locally with a global imprint, and you are it this year. First of all, how do you feel about being recognized? And also, I think I already know your answer. But then, secondly, looking at the port and its global reach, you touched upon it earlier, but kind of a big picture overview of the global impact of what the port is doing and what will it be doing.
Well, to answer your first question, it's truly an honor, but it's also embarrassing. I am a goofy, funny-looking guy, so it's awkward for me. On what is happening here at the port in terms of global connections, one of the happiest moments of my life, had the opportunity to visit with the Royal Air Force about a year and a half ago. One of the squadron commanders is Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden. He didn't come down for this, but I told the Vice Air Marshal next time she comes down, she needs to bring him.
That's a must.
It is. Remember that you had me over with Eddie giving a conversation?
Yes, at the annual meeting, yeah.
2 days later, after Eddie posted it, I got on LinkedIn, and the guy who is running the modernization effort for the Royal Air Force posted a link to it. And he said, what they are doing in San Antonio is a model that the UK is going to look at and advance through the Commonwealth. I'll send you a screenshot of this. And I wish more people had seen it, because I don't think anybody actually pays attention to what's on LinkedIn. It's just a way for people to scam you. But not because it mentioned me or because it mentioned whatever I might have an ability to do. But we don't give ourselves in San Antonio enough credit that we are doing some things that nobody else is doing. When it comes to advanced air mobility, everybody and their uncle is trying to be prepared for the day where you can actually monetize this. And nobody is looking at San Antonio because they're looking at communities where people pay $200 a head to fly to a downtown environment, which we don't have in San Antonio. But we can actually become a test bed location for those aircraft now. For what can be done with the integration of signals and communication and critical infrastructure protection, both in our critical infrastructure assets and our transportation networks, that work is being done in San Antonio today and is going to continue to grow. What Taylor Amy and Dave Brown are doing at UTSA is brilliant. What Texas A&M San Antonio is doing and the Texas A&M system doing is absolutely unparalleled. They're the largest research institution on the planet. Our Lady of the Lake University, where I have the honor of being on the board, is doing amazing things with the integration of humanities and cyber science. This is stuff we don't talk about and we need to talk about. So you said quick answer and I'm babbling on.
Oh, no, no. So this is where the rapid fire comes into play. So I'm just going to throw out a few comparisons and let me know what immediately pops in your head. Whataburger, In-N-Out.
Five Guys.
Okay. Let's see. Chiefs, Eagles.
There is only one team that matters, the Eagles of Philadelphia.
Okay, okay. Cannibal Corpse, Dirty Rotten Imbeciles.
Cannibal Corpse.
Okay. All right.
Don't look up the lyrics.
Well, Jim, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and thank you all for watching. Jim Perschbach, CEO of Port San Antonio. I'm Armen Babajanian, CEO of the World Affairs Council. We'll be honoring Jim at our March 19 International Citizen of the Year at International Citizen of the Year at the Tobin Center, and lots of exciting things happening here. We're looking forward to all the initiatives, all the structures and programs that the port is offering. So thank you for your time, and thank you all for tuning in.